Hello. Yep, I think I'm live. I've never done one of these before, but I just kind of got the idea of something. I was watching a video on the latest news from George R.R. Martin, and apparently he was saying like uh, the writing on Winds of Winter is going even slower than he thought, and most people are assuming this means we will never get the Winds of Winter, which is the sixth book in his A Song of Ice and Fire series. And I think there's supposed to be seven books. I think there's like A Dream of Spring. I think someone said was supposed to be the title of the next video, and or next video book. And I don't know. This kind of sparked a thought in my head. I'm not really sure why I thought this, but I just kind of hop on and make a quickie video, kind of a live stream. We'll see if anyone joins in. But um, it got me thinking about what do artists owe their fans. This is kind of a philosophical thought that's kind of always in the background of creativity that I don't think we really talk about as much kind of up front is what do artists owe their fans. I think the two simplistic answers of these, which means of course they're both wrong, but the one simplistic answer is nothing. Artists don't owe anything to their fans. They have to be true to themselves. They have to be true to their own art. They have to write what they want, how they want, at the pace that they want, releasing it at whatever time they want, and making any changes to their world or their characters or anything that they want to do. They're allowed to do because it's 100% their creative property, and they can do whatever they want. They don't owe their fans anything at all. And then, of course, the opposite example is everything. The writers have to write everything for their fans. They have to consider what their fans want. They want to write to market, write at the pace that they want, the speed that they want, whatever topics that they want. You should write by committee, ask your beta readers, and do polls on Patreon or whatever else, and write just what those folks want. And of course, both of these positions are wrong. On the one hand, if you owe your fans nothing, then you run the risk of making changes that your fans don't like. You run the risk of going off in directions that nobody really wants, or in this case with George R.R. Martin, writing at a pace that no one really can keep sustainable. And then what happens is your fans go away. You don't have fans. People stop buying your stuff, and if they stop buying your stuff, then you don't have a job. And so now you're not a professional full-time writer. You're just a hobbyist. You're back to where most indie authors are, where they got a main job, and then their writing is sort of like the side gig. Sort of like with me. I'm mainly a counselor. That's how I pay my bills, and my writing is something that I want to pay my bills with someday. The converse side is if you owe your fans everything, and you just do whatever your fans want, write whatever they want, whatever they want, putting in whatever you want, writing at the pace that they want, and that sort of thing, then you run the risk of burnout. And what usually happens, I almost even say always happens, is you start to resent everything, because that's a big factor with burnout. With whatever it is you're doing, it comes up with counseling a lot too. As you burn out in counseling, you start to resent your clients instead of wanting to work with them and think about them. You start to resent the time that they take up, the emotional energy that they require, and that sort of thing. And so when you're a writer that all you do is think about your fans and write for your fans, you'll inevitably start to resent the creative process. You'll start to resent the fans who buy your stuff. You'll resent what you're writing, and therefore you won't be enthused about what you're writing, and what you're writing will probably suffer. It won't be really high quality at all anymore. And then again, you go back to losing all your fans. By putting your fans 100% ahead of everything else, you lose them. When you don't put them when you don't consider them at all, then you lose them. So the right answer is usually somewhere in the middle of how should you consider fans. So how does this factor in with George R. R. Martin? Well, he's in that realm where he's just not really considering his fans anymore. The first book, actually, now I'm thinking about it, I need to look this up. when did the first novel come out? It seemed like it was in the 90s. If I had a chat, then I would ask the chat to tell me, but I'll look it up. So it was Game of Thrones. Use the Brave browser and the Brave search engine. It's running a little slow. There we go. Came out in 1996. First published in August 1996. So in 1996, I was about 26 years old. So it was about half my lifetime ago. And it came out in 1996. Let's kind of open up the old Wikipedia here. I don't really trust the Wikipedia, but on these sort of things, I think they probably can be trusted. Okay, so the first book was A Game of Thrones, came out in 1996. Clash of Kings came out 2 years later in 98. Storm of Swords came out 2 years later in 2000. So that's a good pace. That's about 2 years per novel. And these are, you've seen the novels. They're thick novels. These are epic novels. And he was, he's a traditionally published author, and they in general kind of run slow. Apparently, for a long time, publishing houses basically just said that nobody wants to read a book more than one book a year from an author or something, and so apparently that's why a lot of like older writers have like a dozen different pen names, because they could crank out the books a lot faster than the publishers could publish them, or maybe even wanted to publish them. And so they would create a new pen name, submit this book over here, and then they get published over there. And so they could actually get out more than one book a year. But on paper, it looked like there was one a year. So I can't fault George R. R. Martin for those first three books. But then we get Feast of Crows, which was the fourth book, and that took 5 years. So it was 2000 and 2005. And then from Feast of Crows, it was 6 years in A Dance of Dragons. That came out in 2011. That was 11 years ago. 11 years ago, the fifth book finally came out. And we still have no idea when the Winds of Winter is going to come. That's, in my mind, that's getting in the realm of he just didn't really give a shit about his fans. He has a very dedicated, very vocal fan base. They love his books. They love a lot of his side work. They probably love the TV show. I quit watching it, I think, after season 3. But, I mean, let's put this in context. There are independent writers right now that could crank out the Song of Ice and Fire series in probably less than a year. Probably in a couple of years at most. But there are a lot of independent writers who put out 7 books a year with no problem, because that's what they do. They consider this their job. They sit down and they write books and they publish books, and mind you, these are independent authors, so they're also doing. They're probably not creating their own covers, but they are working with a cover designer. They have to do their own marketing. They have to do their own social media. They have to do their own writing. They're working with editors, and so they are doing not just the writing, they're doing all the publishing pieces. And oh, I see someone come on. I can't read. Hello, Maria. And so, yeah, your typical independent writers are doing every aspect of the writing process, and they can still crank out 7 books in a year or two. In the time it took him to put out 2 books, they could pretty much put out the whole series. And then I will now say something fairly controversial. We'll see if I get some hate mail over this. George R. R. Martin is not that special of a writer. What he did was he turned the fantasy genre on its head at the time. He wrote this book, first book, Game of Thrones, came out in '96. At that time, we were coming off of the heyday of sword and sorcery fantasy that was big in the 70s and certainly big in the 80s. There was a big resurgent interest in Robert E. Howard stories, and so he he kind of was coming off of that, and then the 90s, the early 90s, mid 90s, that's when we started getting a lot more of the high epic fantasy, a little more like Dungeons and Dragons in novel format. I think a lot of the stuff that was coming out back then was a lot like the Dragonlance series and that sort of stuff. And so what Martin did with the Game of Thrones was he took those two ideas and he put them together. We have an epic world full of cast of dozens of characters and this epic long history, um, lots of political intrigue going on, and he combined that with a sort of sword and sorcery feel of a novel, because it was dark. People didn't like each other. People were mean and nasty. We have incest, like in book one, we're getting into incest. We have child murder. He pushes what is it, Brandon out of the book, out of the window. Um, we've got intrigue. We've got evil kids. Spoiler alert. Although the book's been out for 26 years, you probably already know this. But Ned Stark dies in the end. He killed the hero. For the whole book, we're kind of led to believe that Ned Stark was the hero and he was the good guy, and then he gets executed in the end. And what was cool about that was it sent that signal that this is your different kind of fantasy story. This is your different kind of fantasy novel. The hero doesn't always win in the end. Um, I am, he was in a way saying, I am killing this notion of your sort of Lord of the Rings, uh, even Conan the Barbarian sort of character in Lord of the Rings. The good guys win, not necessarily in this case. In Conan the Barbarian, the hero always overcomes and rides off into the sunset with the girl, not necessarily in a Game of Thrones. And so that in that sense, he did a really interesting thing. He kind of brought in this sort of grim, dark view of a high fantasy world. And then that's really about it. Um, so many other authors have done similar stuff or similar stuff written in similar styles with similar plot lines that he did. He didn't really, there was already fantasy novels and series with political intrigue at the time. There was already sword and sorcery uh, stories and that sort of thing. And so he has a massive, huge fan base. Um, but I don't think I don't think he can afford to just ignore them like he's been doing. I don't think he can really just kind of like blow it off and that sort of thing. And in the article, a lot of people will probably give me shit about this. He's talking about how because of pandemic and COVID, and he's had all these friends die and that sort of thing. And I admit certainly life gets in the way, and life will interrupt. I've definitely had that happen. That's one of the reasons why I've written uh, book one in the New Age Rises series, which is first book is Saga of the Scout. I had started writing book two in early 2000. Then the pandemic hit, and then I just didn't really feel like writing a post-apocalyptic story at the time. And then I kind of got over that, and then I got distracted by some other things, and I will get back to it again. I can guarantee you it will not take me 26 years to finish this book. I'm 52. I don't have 26 years to spend time writing. Um, and so I give him a pass on like the past couple of years, but it's been 11 years since his last book came out. What the fuck was he doing for that 11 years, really? I mean, it took him 5 years to write book four, and apparently book four and book five, the what were those books names? Feast of Crows and A Dance of Dragons. Apparently, those were originally one book. It was one super long book, and his publisher said, "We don't want to publish that, so cut it in half. We'll publish one book, and then we'll publish the other book." So, if that's true, that means the Dance of Dragons was actually done a long time ago, because it should have been ready to publish around the same time the Feast of Crows was, because he could have just split the two out and then you know touch up the two books to make sure that they were coherent, that they were all really two books. But it should not have taken him 6 years to get out, from Feast of Crows to Dance of Dragons. And here we are with Winds of Winter, and we're 11 years out, and chances are, who knows when or if he's ever going to finish it. And so, yeah, I can give him a pass for the past 2 years. What about all the other years that he just was doing something else, and he just, so I don't know. I guess that's probably just a little bit of a rant. Like I said, it was something, a thought that I had that I saw this video, and so I guess kind of went out there, and I think the comments will be available. I've never done a live stream before. But I might do some others when these little one-off topics come up. Probably not going to schedule them, but let me know what you think. How much do you, if you're a writer, if you're a creator, how much do you feel like you owe your fans? How much do you put your fans' opinions in front of whatever it is that you're creating? I think that'd be kind of interesting, because I know that the two extremes, absolutely everything and absolutely nothing, I know those are wrong. I'm not going to probably never agree that those are right. So I know the answer for me is somewhere in the middle. I'm just not exactly certain where in the middle that is, but anyway, yeah, just kind of let me know what you think. I still got another video coming out this tomorrow. This will be for my mental health series. I think I actually talked, if I remember right, we're talking about drugs, trying to get into the specifics of alcohol use. I think it's alcohol, weed, heroin. I think I talk a little about stimulants and psychedelics. So yeah, still got that video coming out tomorrow morning. And anyway, I will talk to you later. Bye.